Okay, so we're back, and before we go ahead and jump right into automatic tracking, there's a couple of things I want to briefly discuss. The first is I want to show you the actual trackers that I created between clips. So I'll bring that up here, and you can see I have 12 total. Now, it's just kind of a mixed bag. Some of these are kind of like that first tracker where we got almost the entire track in one go. Several of these had to be kind of picked up after being kind of blocked off, kind of like the one at the cheek. And even, for example, the one down here at the chin is two separate trackers. You could see one goes almost the whole way. Then there's one where it's really just kind of unintelligible. You can't quite see the point at all. So I picked up with another tracker afterwards. Um, Anytime I came across data that just looked just really bad, something that I was afraid that it's just going to be too blurry to get something workable off of, I just let it go. I didn't go ahead and track it. I just left that area blank and moved on to my next tracker. I'm not too concerned about it because these are not going to be my only tracking points. These are going to be some of the really important ones, but I'm going to have hundreds, if not thousands, of other trackers that are going to be created through the automatic tracking system. Okay, so before we again move on to the automatic trackers, the other thing I want to briefly discuss is lens distortion. Now, we haven't discussed this yet. Typically, it is something we would work with early on because it doesn't really affect this shot. When I shot with this camera, the lens I used had very little distortion to it, and it actually doesn't really affect the center. It definitely affects the edges here a tiny little bit, and it will probably affect his shoulders, maybe around his neck here, but none of those are things that I'm going to be tracking. However, let's say you do have a shot where you need to remove some lens distortion because maybe your character's face is towards the left, towards the right, or really in any area where you're going to have a lot of that, distortion. Let me show you how you can go ahead and get rid of that. So to start, I'm going to go ahead and create a lens distortion node, and we'll go ahead and plug that in. Now there are three ways to remove lens distortion through this node. There's image analysis, grid analysis, and line analysis. Image analysis is automatic. Basically, you click Analyze Sequence, and it's going to try to track the scene, look for changes, and try to remove the distortion. That's not really going to work here because the parts that are moving don't have any distortion to begin with. It's not going to be able to find what we actually need. So this is not really going to work for us. Grid analysis would if we had the proper data for it. What we basically need here is a grid or a checkerboard that's been filmed by the same camera and the same lens. You can imagine that right after you shot something, you can hold a grid up in front of the camera, shoot it. Obviously that grid will be distorted, but a grid is something that can very easily be analyzed by this system and undistorted because it's looking for straight lines. We unfortunately didn't have that, so we can't really use this method. Which brings us to line analysis. Here, we're actually going to draw straight lines where there should be straight lines, for example, at these edges here, and obviously there'll be some curvature to them when we draw them because the lens is distorted. What Nuke will then do is straighten those those lines out, hence removing the lens distortion. So I'll go ahead and show you how to do that. You have to be actually very careful with this. I'm probably not going to get a fantastic result. You need to really come in here and try to draw them as exact as possible. And because my footage is a bit fuzzy, it's going to be a bit difficult to get it exact, but at least you'll understand the basic method. So I need to put down 3 points and then right click, and that'll create a line. You want to get as many of these lines as you can that are of course accurate. I'm going to try to maybe get one over here. Again, you can see it's a little nondescript here. I can't be quite sure if I'm dead on or not. And being off by even a few pixels can actually give you a false positive in that it undistorts areas that are not originally distorted. So, and I've had that a few times. When I did this really carefully, he has no distortion on his face at all. If I do it kind of quickly, then he does. So let's go ahead and do this one here. I'm trying to be at least semi-accurate without spending forever. And ideally, I'd want to get this one too, but this one's really kind of hard to see where it should be. I'll do my best though. So maybe there. Actually, from far away, it's a little bit easier, maybe about there. and about there. All right, I have 4 lines. Again, ideally I'd want a little bit more, but there's also nothing I can really do for the center of the footage here. But once you've done that, you just hit Analyze Lines. Okay, and you can see the footage has shifted a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and hide those lines, and let's pull in on our footage just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and disable it, and you could see we have adjustments on the lines. They've been straightened out. And it looks like I've gotten this one pretty good because, again, you could see he's not distorted at all. However, we have quite a bit of distortion here. So you could see it was pretty curved here, and here it's straightening it back out for us. So again, he is, though, untouched. You can see we can zoom in. There's no changes on him. So again, if you need to, that's one way to go ahead and remove, or at least a few ways, one way that we actually look through to remove lens distortion. When we move on to automatic tracking next, you'll see there's actually a way to also remove lens distortion there. What it's really using is just this image analysis, though. All right, so we're done with this, and I'll see you guys in the next clip.